Welcome to LOA Today. I'm Walt Thiessen.
With me today is financial advisor Jody Lynn Craven.
This is your daily dose of happy. We are so happy you decided to join us today.
And I got to tell you, folks, I've been riding an interesting high lately. We all go through ups and downs, right? That's just part of being alive, being manifestors, being abundant people. But lately I've been on an interesting high, and I kind of made reference to it yesterday when we had David Strickle on yesterday, Jody Lynn.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so we had, this is the stream talking to us. But David and I were talking before that, and I was mentioning to him that I've been on this. It's not only been a high, but I have a few projects going on. You know about a couple of my projects. I have a few of these projects going on, and I realized I had nothing to do that day.
Cool.
And I wasn't sure what to do with myself.
What a great place to be.
Yeah. Well, it was confusing, right? I'm such a doer, right? Like so many of us are, I have everything I have to do with nothing to do. Like, holy crap. I took the day, today too. So I took the day off and read a book. I haven't done that in ages. I can't remember the last time I read a book.
Beautiful. That's so interesting that you say that, because I have been feeling so overwhelmed with things to do because my assistant in my brokerage business has been gone. And then it was just extreme overwhelm because she does everything for me. Literally. I can't live without this woman. She takes care of everything in the background. And then I was like buttoning everything up, getting ready for her to come back. And all of the overwhelm just went away, and all the things like the busyness, it was all gone. And now that she's back, it's like smooth sailing, and I am having the same experience. Like, what do I need to do today? Very interesting.
It's when you're not used to it, it's actually kind of a funny place to be because it's disorienting.
Yes.
Because you're not used to it, right? It's like, okay, I should be doing something. Like, check the calendar. Oh, there's nothing there. No, there's got to be something I got to do here.
Yeah. Check my to-do list. I think I forgot something.
That's right. Yes. I actually did twice just to make sure I had missed something. Now, there is one thing I wanted to remind myself about, and so I'm going to bring it up here. Lately, the last few days, listeners have been hearing messages from me about an event that I've got planned for Wednesday, October 19th. And I want to reiterate it here live on the show, because the announcement that I put up, I realized I didn't really give great details on it, so I wanted to give some details. Because we've talked a lot here. I mean, virtually every guest we ever have, you and I, Jody Lynn, all the other co-hosts, we all talk about the same thing. It all starts with mindset. Mm-hmm. And that mindset is so critical. It's so crucial. And we talk about different ways that we can improve it and why it's so important and how you can make shifts and so forth. But it occurred to me, I've got all these great people who've been on the show. I have a wonderful listening audience. There ought to be some way I can kind of marshal our efforts to kind of help people with that in some way. And so I thought to myself, well, why not do like a live event where everybody just kind of groups together and supports each other's mindset, do group activities to build mindset and so forth. So that's what we're going to try as an experiment on October 19th. I already have about a dozen people who've responded that they want to come. I'm sure more are going to want to come. And I want to invite listeners to, anyone who wants to join in, to feel free to do that as well. I'll include a link in today's show notes for it. But the webpage you go to in order to register for it, and it's free, is loatoday.net/brain, BRAIN, because we're retraining the brain. We call it the Brain Retrainers Club. So it's an experiment. I don't know what's going to come out of this. I mean, I have a few ideas in mind. A couple of other people have suggested ideas too, but it's going to be fun if nothing else. So.
Mm-hmm. And what does that look like? Is that like a Zoom room?
Yeah, it'll be a Zoom room, right? So it'll be a Zoom meeting. Everybody will be able to participate. We're going to do group activities like group appreciations, rampages of appreciations. We're going to be we're going to take a lot of the Abraham Hicks experiments and do some of them. One of the co-authors of the book that I helped edit a few years ago, she's going to do a special presentation where I don't even quite understand what she's doing, but it's some stuff where you're touching your head and doing various things to help improve. I have no idea what that was about, but hey, it's an experiment, right? So you try things just to see
I'll
what
do
happens.
it.
Yeah.
Why not?
Well, it's not that crazy. One of my other co-hosts is an advocate of what is known as Jin Shinjitsu, which is basically holding various parts of the body to relieve pain, release stress, and so forth. So it may be in line with what he knows. I don't really know, but we're going to find out.
Have you seen the tapping guy on YouTube?
Oh yeah. Yeah, we've had tapping experts.
He's good. So he's doing this stuff, and I started doing it, and I thought, I get this. It actually works.
It does. Oh yeah, that's been popular for about two dozen years, something like that. Close to that, I think. Certainly over 20 years. Yeah, pretty cool stuff. But anyway, we should introduce you so that people know who you are, right, Jody Lynn? I mean,
yes.
It's kind of rude to have a guest and not introduce them.
That's right.
Anyway, his name is Larry Kaul, and Larry is the head of Solopreneur Incorporated, which we're going to ask him about in just a moment because it's a cool name. But he's been working over 22 years. He's produced $17 million in revenue in his businesses. He's averaged three-quarters of a million a year. That's pretty darn good. And he just started the Solopreneur thing a few years back because he realized people had to make a shift. He basically profited out of it, cashed out of businesses he was running before that. And he's going to tell us a little bit about what that's about. But first, we want to get to know who he is and welcome him to the show. So, Larry, welcome to the show. Thank you for joining us. How are you doing today?
Thanks, Walt. Thanks, Jody Lynn. I'm doing great. I'm excited to be here. I love these kinds of conversations, and I've got to get an invite to that Zoom room.
Yeah, sure. I'll be glad. I'll make sure I send you an email.
I love those types. It's one of my favorite types of events where you can actually meet people as opposed to just listen.
Yes.
In the audience.
And there's no pressures of any kind. There's no agendas. There's nothing that somebody's trying to sell you something. There's it's just, hey, let's just see what we can do to help each other. That's my favorite kind of event.
Yeah, exactly. So I've been, I guess, a student of self-employment most of my life. But I drifted into it without really wanting it. I was pretty screwed up.
Okay, I got to ask you, I got to stop right. How do you drift into something without wanting it? You got to explain that part to me.
I was pretty screwed up when I was younger. So, in law of attraction, some of these things, we talk a lot about conditioned belief systems. So I took on some pretty bad conditioned belief systems. And one of those was I had to be successful in a certain way. And that contradicted who I really am. But I had no way of getting to who I really am at the time. So what I did was I powered through a career trajectory that would allow me to become important. Because I think that's what I was told I was supposed to do.
Yeah.
And I went down that pathway, and it was an utter skid off the runway. Step 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. So that led to, I really don't know what to do.
I know the feeling.
And it's almost like a solopreneur thing. So many solopreneurs I talk to are really independent, streak-minded people that are not easily fitting in to a nice little square hole. So they have to create themselves and create a life around it. And that's essentially what I did. And I was really good at it, but I didn't appreciate it. So I was always good at like building businesses and doing sales and lead generation, all those kinds of things. But I didn't see value in that. It was just what I was able to do because I wasn't able to do the thing that I thought I was supposed to do. Well, I discovered through, obviously, like we've all done a lot of personal development work, you can't do that. You can't get here without doing that stuff, right? Because you've got to unwind a lot of these conditioned belief systems and really get to the heart of them inside yourself and go, I like to, take the red pill and see how deep the rabbit hole goes from the Matrix. Like I'm like, oh, okay, I took the red pill. Now I got to go. Who knows what's down there, but I'm
going.
Right?
Yeah.
I'm sliding down deep. So what came out of the other side was embracing this and then recognizing that the business I had, which I still have, which I've turned over to somebody to run, was not the right business for me to build. And that's what 2 years ago led to, I'm going to find a different way to do this. And that's what kind of led to this.
Wow.
Very good. And distinguish between a solopreneur and an entrepreneur so we know what we're talking about here.
So a solopreneur and entrepreneur are very different to me. So an entrepreneur is someone with a idea that can be turned into a product and maybe beta tested out in the marketplace, and based on its success can attract capital, and that allows that person to scale. And usually they turn over control of the business in return for capital at some point in pursuit of a financial exit. And there's a career path for this. You know, the top level, you go to Stanford, and then you go to an incubator, and then you do that. It's all laid out for you.
Mm-hmm.
Now, solopreneur to me is someone where, for whatever reason, you know, maybe they aged out, maybe they never aged in, maybe they never wanted to age in. You know, I mean, who knows? But for whatever reason, they saw something that they really wanted to do. And it has to do with who they want to become as well. So then they're launched out into the marketplace. Well, guess what the product is?
You.
It's you. Well, if the product's you got to operate a little differently than if the product's a piece of software. So you need a totally different kind of support system and pathway. Because Stanford Business School, as great as it is, isn't going to work for you.
Not really, no.
I like the way that you put that. I've never heard anybody describe entrepreneur versus solopreneur in that way. It's mostly just like the amount of staff you have, you know, you're either by yourself and doing everything, or, you know, you have some people that work for you that keep the business going while you can't, which those things could also be true. But I love that you're saying the path is completely different for that entrepreneur that you're describing versus the solopreneur, because it is. I've never thought about that.
You know, it's interesting to see it and watch it and what people do, because, you know, the solopreneur has there's stages of development. And what I call stage 5 is basically you making some decisions around how to scale. Solopreneur scale? Scale what? Well, yeah, you got to scale something. So at some point, you have figured out what you really want to be doing and what you'll be focusing on. And you've built the right kind of company. We call it build from company from the inside out. Then you build a company with the market, so people actually buy what you're selling. And then you develop your offer. So you have really good solid offers. Then you develop your revenue system. We call it an organic revenue farm. So you've got, you know, business and so on coming in. And then there's a phase where you got to look up and say, what do I want to spend my time doing? Well, now, is it just going to be me? Is it going to be me with a small VA team? Is it going to be me with a small virtual team? Is it going to be me with a partner or a barter partner or some staff? Still in the solopreneur world, but now you're just scaling. How do I scale? Do I scale my product? Do I scale the way I deliver my product? One-to-many systems. There's all kinds of ways today to do it. I mean, there's thousands of ways to scale a solopreneur business. But at heart, it's still a solopreneur business to me.
Yeah. So how do you know which way is the best way? Sorry, Walt.
No, I think that's a good question. I like it.
Well, when you start, so we call it build the business from the inside out first. So how do you do that? Well, you start with your power. So I like archetypal energy development. So you figure out what it is. There's 12 of them. And then you figure out the impact of that out in the world. So that's what you're supposed to bring, you know, out to the world. And then you do what you call find your zone, which is what do I really want to be spending my time doing? And there's a great book called Spark Types that helped me kind of get to this. And I've welded in, you know, a couple other ideas, but that's kind of the anchor for me. And I think there's 12 spark types. You figure out primary and your secondary. It tells you what you want to be doing all day. And then from there, you really got a good starting point, along with some other elements, to figure out kind of what that company needs to look like. So for example, I'm what's called Maven/Sage. That's a problem.
Okay.
Why? Because I don't want to do anything. I want to learn stuff and provide insight to other people. So I have to build a company that will do something, but I'm not the one who can do that. So I have a partner. So I found someone I've worked with for a long time who's that other half of this. So he's a creator. He's a creator sage. He wants to build the systems. Now that's why it works. So you've got to look at kind of who you're. So I don't want to scale my work time. I want to do more group education and things like that, as opposed to lots of like one-on-one coaching or leading a movement or a team or something like that. So I think knowing who you are gets you to the what does the company need to be, later. And of course, everyone skips that step.
Well, you got me thinking about it, actually. And I'm thinking about it in two different ways at the same time that don't necessarily play well together. Because on the one hand, I'm thinking, wow, I'd really like to know which one of those 12 I am. And on the other hand, I'm thinking, oh, God, it's another one of those things that somebody put together. Oh, here's what the labels are. Do I really want to do that again? And I'm feeling both of those at the same time.
Yeah.
It's confusing a little bit, but it's also intriguing. What about you, Jody? When you thought about, when you heard him describing these first one or two out of 12 different archetypes, what would you think?
Well, I've heard of different archetypes. I've never done the test that you were talking about, but it's interesting the timing of this conversation because, sort of on the archetype stream, last week and this week on our YouTube show that I'm a part of, we were doing human design. Human design talks a lot about the ideal person that you are, who you're supposed to be in this lifetime. Mm-hmm. And I love the concept of knowing who you are and building it from there, because we see so many entrepreneurs trying to fit themselves into someone else's box. It needs to be this way. And I'm learning that more and more, diving into human design of how I operate and why I'm here. I'm kind of like you, Larry. I want to share the knowledge. That's one of the things that I bring to the world, is this knowledge and in-depth knowledge. So I love speaking. I love podcasts. I could do just this all day long. But it's interesting because on my coaching business, outside of my financial brokerage, I have a coaching business, which is teaching all about abundance and abundance consciousness. That has been the roadblock in that business, is how do you scale that? Because, I have programs, but it's the knowledge from within that I have learned and who I have become because of all of this knowledge that I have the deep desire to share. So it's like, do I do a product and go this route? And I have a product now, and how do I do that? What do I do? So I think starting from that within place with everything in life, I'm a big advocate for that. I like what you're saying, but I also see, that we do get stuck in these labels of, and maybe it's this archetype and I have to be like this, or these are the things. And, I'm learning, it's always a process, right? Of letting go of what people think I should be and allowing myself to be curious and discover that for myself. So I take everything with a grain of salt, like, oh, this is good information. And do I feel that it's true within my heart or applicable to me within this moment? And I allow myself to, change my mind.
It's funny you mentioned human design too, because Cynthia Chavez actually was the one who introduced me to human design.
Yeah.
And she did the calculation on me and told me I was a manifesting generator. And I said, okay. What do I do with that? I don't know what to do with that.
That's a good point, is usefulness. Yes. So the idea of these frameworks to me is a guide to discover yourself, as opposed to take on someone else's belief system about you. So it's got to ring true. But I think the good ones are pretty accurate. At least that's been my experience. Yeah. So I'm talking about two different ones here. I'm talking about the archetypal energy from Margaret Mead and Carol Pearson from Young and Rubicon, a big ad agency. So they developed this. It's called the market management of meaning for brands. And I've applied that to being solopreneur. And then the other one is the Spark Type, which is about what do you like to do, from Jonathan Fields. So I go to the archetype one first. So how did it work for me? What was the impact? So when I figured out through the test, that, it's kind of on the fence about, do I want to take another test? Well, it's got to be useful or no, right? And if it doesn't resonate, then okay, well, move on. But for me, it really did. So what came up was what's called magician, primary, and then second, outlaw. And
so what does that mean?
Well, and then my partner took it. He's a magician creator, magician architect. And we looked at each other and we're like, damn, there's something here. So I started delving into it. Well, now I know what I'm supposed to do. So what does a magician do in history? What is the archetype energy? What is that archetypal energy channel, basically? It channels for people who have a desire for mastery that can't tolerate sitting in incompleteness, being stuck, or feeling powerless. It channels a alchemic solution, a bridge towards achievement. So we figured out our market. So who's our market? It's solopreneurs who want achievement.
Yeah.
And are willing to take the risks and move forward. Right? So I could go on, but there's 12 of these and you figure out the energy you have and it tells you what your market is and the impact you make on the market. And that's how I use it. So it's not about being defined by it. It's about being freed by it. Because part of being self-employed is you got to figure out who your market is and you get one. You can't serve the whole universe. And I think the traditional mechanisms
frustration,
work very well.
It'll work great, If you like to be frustrated, if you like to be disappointed, then you can try to serve the whole universe.
You can do whatever you want. Yeah, that's right. You can. I love I forget who I heard say this. Would you rather be happy or right? And at certain points in my life, I would rather be right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
If I'm honest with you, now, I would rather be happy. So I've learned to, the concept of, beginner mind and opening up my mind, listening to other people is very hard for me at first.
Yeah. I like how you're putting this in context because going through that human design process was also freeing for me. Walt, I got a human design expert to read the chart to me because I was like, yeah, so what now? What? Yeah. And that just happened, last week. But for me, it made a lot of things clear. It was things that I knew. So a quick example of this is one of the centers that is not defined for me talks about proving your worth or like proving yourself. And so that center is not defined for me. And what that means is that I'm not here to prove anything. And I can see times in my life where I have really been conditioned to, I have to prove something. I have to prove that I'm worthy. I have to prove I'm good enough. I have to prove that I'm a good financial advisor, that I'm knowledgeable, whatever. Now when I started the coaching company that, this isn't just a bunch of hooey that I slapped together, that I'm not just a crazy person. And the more that I try and prove that the fluid money blueprint that I teach works or that this works or that I'm good enough, the more resistance I experience in my universe. Mm-hmm. The more that I sit back and allow this is what it is. This is what I created. Do you want it or not? The more that I step into that power and understand that about myself, the easier things become for me. So that was mind blowing and freeing, like you said, Larry, for me, seeing that. And when I am trying to prove something, I'm completely out of alignment. So it was a good shift for me.
Which makes a lot of sense. That's what we're taught. I mean, let's be honest. Everybody in society is taught you must prove whatever it is, X, Y, Z. We're all in the business of proving things. So of course you're being taught that.
Yeah.
And it's interesting with law of attraction when you start to really understand how it works by doing it, because you can't really understand this by reading a book about it.
That's right.
When you actually start doing these things and you realize what really is it, and how does it work? And I think it probably does vary from person to person. One of the things that happened to me was my peripheral view opened up. So all of a sudden I saw things that were right in front of me anyways, and recognized it's all there already. So I don't really have to try that hard, but I have to learn a lot of skills and build some hard skills. So, on the other side of opportunity is hard work. So I think a lot of people think of the law of attraction as you're somehow manifesting money that just goes in your bank account. And I saw this guy on, I don't know what, I was so mad at him, but it was like TikTok or YouTube, and he's manifest the money, and I'm like, for only $1,000, I can help you.
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh my God, it's work, but you know what work to do. And the tools kind of like reveal themselves to you, like Louise Hay, who's someone I really didn't know about or resonate with that much. I finished one of her books this morning, actually, and it was really important in that moment that I read that book. And a friend of mine said, oh, you really should read this book, because she was listening to me, and I think she saw it. So I'm open to this. And that's, I think, what this is really about. It's, about getting out of your own way.
Yeah.
It's very simple, isn't all of this stuff? Like at the end of the day.
Well, it's simple.
We make it complicated.
Exactly. It's simple, but it's not easy for whatever reason.
Not easy.
We find stuff it's not easy, but it's also simple. You can explain it in 5 minutes, and then you spend the next 5 years trying to explain why you're having so much trouble with it.
Yeah. Or why you just can't let it go. Like,
Yeah. Well, that's called a market opportunity for some people.
That's true. Yes, that is true.
yeah.
But again, I would imagine that also depends on your archetype, doesn't it?
Well, I think it depends on your archetype quite a bit. And, the what do I like to do thing is one thing. The archetype of what impact can I make on who in a business environment is a brand, is a personal brand, is the magician, outlaw, magician, creator kind of stuff. And I think as that, naturally when you bring yourself to the surface authentically, which is can be hard, because then, people can say, oh, you're an idiot or whatever. It's like, well, that's me you're talking about here, buddy. So, like an artist would go through, I get what creators go through now more. I never thought of myself as a creative person, but now I can see that pain. You put artwork out there and people reject it. And it's like, it's like rejecting me. So you gotta learn how to do that. But if somebody's archetype is about, for example, there's one, called the lover. And the primary thing of the lover archetype is to make people who feel orphaned, abandoned, alone, feel a sense of safety, or not safety, but more a belonging. And if somebody's bringing that to you, you're creating your business in a very different way from what I am, and you're attracting a different type of person, and maybe the product needs to be very different.
Yeah. The strategy even on how you have an organic farm, as you put it earlier, is probably also different, because they're two very different people. One feels abandoned and you want to love them in whatever capacity or whatever that looks like. And one is people who are on this road to achievement, or a desire to achieve and take risks on that road to achievement. It's two different people.
It is very different. But what is interesting, though, I've noticed this too, is I think the fundamental principles of everything are kind of the same, no matter how you're using them. So the business principles and ways of living and thinking and operating, the marketing, the sale, that is all kind of the same, regardless of where you're applying it.
Okay.
I've noticed that too. It's really not. People think everything's unique. I'm unique. My industry is unique. It's not.
Yeah, there's an app for that.
It's like the same stuff works for everybody, and the same bad stuff doesn't work for anybody.
Got it.
Right. 7 fast steps to success doesn't work for anybody.
No.
It doesn't.
They don't believe it can only be 7 and it'll be fast. So they're like, cut themselves off right at the beginning. Yeah.
Plus the problem that I've had with those, 7 steps to whatever, or, here are the steps. It's always some number of steps, right? It's somewhere between 3 and 20, and it varies from one entrepreneur to the next. But it's always some series of steps. And the problem with the steps is when you're taking the steps, unless you're paying a coach a good amount of money, when you run into a problem, you don't know what to do with that step. So what do you do with the next step? I don't know. Okay, toss that book aside. Let's go on to the next project, because I don't know what to do with it.
Yeah.
It's interesting that when we were constructing our product offering for Solopreneur Inc., we had to let the market tell us what it needed to be. So the company's coming out of me, but the product is coming from the market. So they're telling me what they want and what they need, which are 2 separate things, as you probably noticed if you've been in business for a while. but they need to kind of come together at some point. We recognized that with the solopreneur world, they just don't want to be more confused. So they really don't want to have to learn a bunch of stuff. So our solution to that was to create office hours. So we just made ourselves available 16 hours a week in a Zoom room. So if you're a subscriber, you come in and we're just there. And we'll talk about whatever we need to talk about. So you get unstuck right away. And then to have things doled out methodically, step by step, as opposed to this overwhelming amount of information. So it's a very specific market. They told me what they needed, and that's what we put together for them. Now, if it was somebody who has $100 million business or what, it's going to be very, very different.
Sure.
In terms of how they want you to deliver it.
But I love the fact that you're doing that. You're not only did you find a way to identify what the market you were aiming at needed and how to deliver it, but you found a way to do something that very few have been able to do in almost any business setting. And that is how to make it accessible without making it overwhelming.
Yeah.
Because it's accessible. All they have to do is just show up at the Zoom room, within office hours.
Well, I want to be careful. I want to be careful. I'm not selling a magic blue pill here. If we go back to the Matrix, again, because it's a lot of hard work. So our job is to provide a support system to make it easier for people to know what hard work to do.
Sure. Oh, yeah. I don't mean to take away from the work that has to be.
Because they're doing the wrong stuff all the time. Mm-hmm. Everyone is doing the wrong things. So there's different kind of underlying thinking systems as well as decision-making processes and analytical tools and things like this to figure out what am I even supposed to do right now. Yeah. That becomes really important. But there's no easy solution. It's all hard work. You guys know that. We all know that. But we have that other brain, that's looking for the pill and the easy answer all the time. It's just there's no escaping that.
There's a piece of us that wants to have that bank account that just fills up with the money, like you were describing earlier. Of course,
just manifest it.
Just manifest it.
It'll just come.
Yeah, it's always possible. Just not necessarily what I necessarily recommend, but yeah, it's always possible. Anything's possible.
I still have to develop some business skills to make that happen.
But what I was getting
allow that to happen. I have to develop some business skills to allow that to happen.
Yes. Well, but I was getting at. I love the fact that you took. See, here's the way most programs work, and I'm not denigrating any program. I'm just saying this is the way it usually is. Usually, there's some kind of a course. There's a coaching program that sits behind it in some way. There are maybe some intermediate steps in there, and when you want to transverse the course, when you want to travel through it and learn it and so forth, and learn whatever it is the teacher is trying to teach you, you work within the constraints of what that has to offer. The problem is you're working within the constraints of what it has to offer. And I'm not saying that that's bad. I'm just saying that's what you sometimes are running into. And you figured out a way to get around that. And I'm admiring that. I think it's pretty cool that you figured out a way to just kind of break through the constraints and say, look, we're just going to solve the problem when you have a problem that comes up. You can't figure out what to do with it.
Mm-hmm.
I appreciate that. And I think that the way people, and I can give people a tip about how to do this, because anybody can do this. It's actually not that hard, is when you're talking to people, you've got to figure out what's going on with them. And I like the Steve Jobs idea of, I'm not going to ask people, or Henry, you're talking about Henry Ford, I'm not going to ask people what they want because they'll just tell me they want a faster horse, so Steve Jobs understood what they really wanted from the iPhone and the iPod and all these things he created, because he knew people inside out. So when you become an expert in your market, because you're talking to people and asking them the right questions, they're not telling you the product itself that you're going to build, but they're telling you what it needs to do. And when you understand that, then you can start to see, oh my God, we got to do this. My partner came up with the idea. He's like, what if we did some office hour things so they didn't have to go a week, before they could talk to us? And I was like, oh, how can we do that? But you can't do that if you don't fully understand what people are thinking and what they really need, and their barriers and belief systems and blockers and that have gotten them to where they are, which is not where they want to be, in the context of what you can do for them. And everything comes out of that. That's been my experience. And I've never done it like this before. This is all new for me in the last 2 years. So before, I came up with an idea and I said, this is it. And I pushed it out into the marketplace and I tried to talk people into paying me.
Yeah.
I've been doing that my whole life.
How's the new approach working?
It's better than that. It's interesting because it's not just about money for me now. Obviously, I want to make enough money to cover my lifestyle, but we are going very slow with this. So it's still a pretty young new business. We are gating the amount of customers we will take, and it limits the amount of immediate revenue we can build because we want to get results and we want to enjoy doing it. Mm-hmm. So I'm not going to unleash the floodgates and really push hard, out into the marketplace. So it's kind of what, you guys were talk about a lot as well on the podcast. It's, the time will come when it's ready, basically. And I think this is a different way to do things as well. And some people, unfortunately, they may not have the luxury to do that, but, I'm looking to make a lot of money. So I'm not afraid of money. I want to make a lot of money, but I want to do it in a way that makes me happy as opposed to creates a lot of pain and stress because I feel like, how am I going to service all these people? Mm-hmm. And then they're going to hate me and it's going to fall apart and, I'm a liar and, I don't want to go through all that.
It's not sustainable. Yeah.
Well, it also raises a very interesting question that we've talked about quite a bit. And I'm curious to know what your take is on this. If you want to pursue doing something that you love, actually it's a two-part question. First, how do you figure out what that is? And second of all, how do you do it?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of, I don't want to call it lying. I just think it's more misunderstanding. So if my job is to do what I love and forget the rest, that's great. But who will pay me for that? And what incredibly difficult to master skills do I have to master to be able to do that? So you don't just get that. But if you look ahead and you say, wow, I've always wanted to do this. And then you kind of look at it, it's like kind of why, like what's underneath that. And, building the company from the inside out and sort of figuring all that stuff out. And then you look out there and you go, let me test this. So we have learned to think in terms of hypotheses. So I suspect people will want to pay me for this. Mm-hmm. Let me go find out before I quit my job.
Yeah.
Right? So you go out and you have what we call them connection conversations. And there's a journalistic oriented framework for getting the information, interviewing, building connection. Sure, that can turn into a sales conversation, but it's also a way to figure out if you're on track. And then you got to look at it and say, is there a market here? Is it a burning desire where they've got to change, they got to buy something, they got to fix this problem? Can I fulfill that profitably in a way that I can afford to build? There's all those questions you got to go through, I think, as opposed to, I've always wanted to be a ballerina. Now I'm going to go be a ballerina and I'm moving to New York. It's just not going to work. For some, maybe it will, because you're so talented that you can do anything. The top 1% can do anything. So if you're in the top 1% of any field, you will succeed.
Yeah.
They need you so badly. Like if you're a great scriptwriter, like screenwriter, you move to Hollywood, you're going to sell a screenplay because they're desperate because there's so many crappy ones coming across their desk. Eventually, they're going to see you. But what about the 99% who aren't? They're, pretty good. That's just, it's different. So we all gear in on the top 1%.
It's a very good point. And we're also kind of leaning in on something near and dear to my heart, because for years I was trying to figure out, well, I love doing the podcast. How do I monetize it? And I actually got to the point, probably I'd say within the last year or two, where I decided, you know what? I don't really want to monetize the podcast because I don't want to spoil it. Because I've been through that. But my wife went through it particularly. She has a gardening service maintenance business that I'm now running for her. And she got to the point running the business end where she came to hate gardening. And she loves gardening. But the business was just, she was just so, it was such an anathema to even consider it that all of a sudden gardening became a chore rather than a love. And it wasn't until she's now retired. It wasn't until she retired that she regained her love of gardening. Gardening became a chore. So I kind of got worried about the same thing with the podcast because I mean, I knew you could do coaching. I knew you could do, there's a lot of things you could do. You could put up merchandise. I didn't want to do any of them. I didn't like the idea of doing any of them. And I was really concerned that if I did any of them, all of a sudden the podcast was going to start feeling cheap to me.
Yeah, that's great. And that's kind of our core philosophy too. So the idea, you know, our sort of our tagline or our slogan is around this idea of, you know, make enough income to support your lifestyle. This is support the lifestyle that you want, but without compromising your happiness. Yeah. And then you define happiness. Because I don't see success as I made all of this money doing this thing, so my business is a success. Because then I'm looking at it, and I'm like, do you feel secure in it? Because I didn't. I was making a ton of money. I felt insecure all the time because I was always chasing my next client because I hadn't built a whole like machine or personal brand, all that stuff. I don't understand any of that. So I felt very insecure. The income was up and down. So that created more insecurity, even though you would look at it and say, oh, it's a successful business. It didn't feel that way to me. Again, I didn't understand any of this at the time. I hated what I did because I really didn't like client service. You know, I like learning stuff and I like talking about it with other people and I want them to have insight and help them shift their thinking and live a better life and all this stuff. My clients didn't want any of that. They didn't want any part of it. They're like, stop talking. Get us more revenue. It was a company. Like they don't want to hear it. They don't want to learn anything. They wanted us to just do the work and get results. And I was like, oh my God, this is so awful. So I built a company I didn't like. And then the stress in the family. I think the toughest thing for solopreneurs is in the spousal side. So I think it's tough for the solopreneur. It's even worse for the spouse who's kind of like, can we go on vacation or not?
Well, in my case, it was more like, what can I do to support you? Because literally, my wife's business put her in the hospital. Wow. I'm not exaggerating.
Wow.
Yeah.
It's not uncommon. I think it's, and, you know, we were talking about conditioned belief systems, and I think, you know, we talk about practices. So we have projects like, you know, you build the company from the inside out as a project, build the company with the market as a project, building this organic revenue farm as a project. A practice is what you do throughout the day. And one of the big practices we call reality-based thinking. And that's really important for entrepreneurs and solopreneurs. And that avoids the situation you're talking about with your wife, where you learn how to build a detached observer muscle so you can see what's actually happening inside yourself and around you. And then you look and you're like, wow, this is awful. Well, you don't do anything about it. You just observe that. You're like, oh, it's awful. Okay. Better pay attention. Delaying gratification. Okay, well, I can't solve the problem right away, but I'm going to start formulating, you know, a solution. Suspending judgment. I'm not a bad person. They're not a bad person. It's just, this is where I got myself. So I think those practices, and you know, most people don't want to do that part. But I think more and more do. And, you know, I'm kind of deliberately melding that into everything that we do, because I think it's the differentiator. So the kinds of stuff you're talking about on the podcast, and those are the things that really matter. It's that fundamental mind shift. And we all know the principles. They're not hiding. You can go on YouTube and Google how to live a good life, how to be successful, and it all pops up. It's all the same stuff that I read, and I'm doing it, but I'm doing it. That's maybe the difference.
Well, there's also something too that happened. Excuse me, Jody, I want to just finish this part of the story. There's also something else that I learned in addition to what you were talking about when helping my wife. Because yes, I did have to kind of develop that objective viewpoint. And yes, I had to kind of delay the gratification and so forth, but I also had to do something else. I also had to let go of the idea that I had to help her to make her business succeed. I had to let go of that and realize, you know what? This may not be a good fit for her. It just may not be a good fit. And what can I do to help her out of it? What can I do to help her? And ultimately, our solution was me taking over the business, even though I know nothing about gardening. I just know how to run a business. Yeah. Fortunately, we have a great staff. Otherwise, I couldn't possibly do it. I mean, get me in there, garden, forget it. I'm going to kill every plant that's in it. But as long as I'm in the office side, it's okay. Everything works just fine. Send the professional gardeners out who know what they're doing. So that was our solution to get past it. But in order to get to that point, she had to be willing to let go, which was tough for her. And I had to be willing to let her let go, which was tough for me because it was our only income at that point. So we were faced with, the challenges that go along with living what it is that you're actually advocating. It's a challenge in those particular situations.
I love the real world example, and my own life has been those moments of, and I've never been on the verge of having to live in my car, so I didn't come from that kind of a background, but I also didn't come from the kind of background where, I just have all this money sitting around, so I've had to, face that, geez, am I have enough money to live, in a year and, those kinds of things, not like tomorrow, but, sort of looking ahead. And what I find is the dramatic crisis always comes at the worst time. So, you're in this solopreneur entrepreneurial business. It's collapsing around you, whatever that means, in your case, the health issue. For me in, the September of 2020 with my other business, the collapse was around revenue instability and my inability to dig in and figure it out, where I just felt like I am so burned out on this thing. I can't even think about it anymore, and I'd already delegated a lot of work to somebody else so I could focus on figuring out what turned into Solopreneur Inc. And I had 15 different concepts before this one, through the summer of 2020. And, that was not what I wanted to have happen, because I was right on the verge of starting to figure some stuff out. And all of a sudden my income was going away, or going way down from that business situation. And the decision to cut the cord on that, have somebody run it for me and pay them and take a huge income hit, use retirement money to build this, is an act of faith. Why did I do that? Desperation. Because keeping the money, I knew I would drive that business into the ground, and then there'd be nothing. So I love, this is not easy. So you don't get into this mindset shifts in moments in the sunshine, dancing around with the daisies around you. It's at the worst possible time. And then you have to lean in and say, I'm in or I'm out. I'm either going to make these changes, or for me, I'm going to implode if I don't change. And then I make the change, but it's got to be that bad.
Awful familiar. Awful familiar.
I'm familiar.
What were you saying, Jody Lynn, before I rudely interrupted you?
Oh, no, it's all good. I think it's so fascinating how, it's got to be that awful point where before we turn inward or whatever. It's, it's so hard, or it's so hard for people to go within. They're like, no, just give me a face cream that'll just fix it. I just want the pill,
Is
give
there
me the
one?
juice.
Have you seen one yet?
Yeah. No.
Crystal meth.
Yeah.
Oh, God.
It's so interesting how we we don't want to go within and look at those things because of the way that we've been conditioned, I believe, to judge ourselves or attach meaning to it or whatever. And I go through the same things that you guys were talking about in my career as an entrepreneur or a solopreneur or whatever with my brokerage business. I almost killed myself just being so unhealthy and just adrenal fatigue. And I kept getting this message that if I kept going the way that I was going, I would end up similar to my mom. My mom is manic depressive and bipolar. So she has these upswings she used to have these upswings that were 24 hours work and then complete crash. And I was following in those exact footsteps. I could see that pattern. And it was like a crash and burn scenario of, I realized I, torched my life, and I was the only one that could take responsibility because I was the common denominator. But it's interesting, that fear that we have of looking within to see what's going on first.
Wow.
And there's so much brain science on this. And it's like, as I've delved into it, further and further, I realized, it's not just me. It's kind of like everybody.
Mm-hmm.
It's interesting when there's a great podcast I love called Founders, the Founders Misfit Feed. And
yeah.
You know it?
Yeah, I'm aware of it.
Oh
yeah.
My God, I love it. So
yeah.
he reads, for people who don't know, I'm forgetting his name, but he reads biographies of successful people with like this animated enthusiasm beyond anything I've ever seen before. I mean, he's obsessed with these biographies, and he'll go on for an hour and a half. These are long. I like long form podcasts myself, and I'm obsessed with podcasts. And what I love about it is he connects themes between all of the authors, and he's heard hundreds of these things. So, I'm listening to all of them, and I'm like, oh my God, every single one of them, there's a horror story in there.
Mm-hmm.
And there's an other side of the horror story, but people only see the other side of the horror story. But you think about that person at that moment in time was about to lose everything, everything, or worse. And they went through the other side because they had the resilience, they had the work ethic, and they had the belief in the mission of what they were doing. And now what I would add to it, because he says those are the two big themes, is it's the mission, the vision, and then the work ethic, the tenacity, the ability to suffer basically through the tough stuff. I would add another part is this, detached observer, kind of accepting incompleteness, putting a pause on things, being able to open your mind and problem solve. I think that's probably almost always, I bet that's always there as well.
Mm-hmm.
I think that component, in other words, what that really means to me is you're separated from your conditioned thinking. So your brain is no longer running you. You're able to kind of like slow it down and separate a bit and see, okay, what's really going on here? Because I think if someone can't problem solve like that, they probably can't get themselves out of that catastrophe.
Yeah.
It's just so sped up. You can't do it.
Man, why don't they teach this stuff in school?
I know.
Like, there's so many things I've been
What else is there that's more important?
What is there that's more important than
ridiculous.
understanding you and how you operate and why you operate that way and how to step away, detach that thinking like you were talking about? These are all fundamental life skills that will either like make or break your path. You're going to learn it one way or another, but
you know the rule about college: those who can do, those who can't teach. That's how they end up being college professors.
That's right. Yeah.
I'm not kidding. It's really true.
Yeah.
It's so frustrating. And, I don't know why. I mean, I think there's a fundamental, just problem in the whole society.
Yeah.
And there's a misunderstanding of what success is and what matters and what it takes to get there, because we're obsessed with achievement of mastery of skills and things like that. And there's nothing wrong with that. It's just that's not a life. That's not the fundamental. But that's what we're teaching everybody. We teach up here,
Yes.
right? That's it. And there's a whole movement of people who are looking at it differently, and it's not a small group anymore.
No, it's growing.
But now it's a growing movement.
Yeah.
I mean, or we wouldn't be on this podcast.
It's fun being a part of that movement, actually.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's amazing because this stuff is everywhere now. You can't escape it. You go on YouTube and there's somebody talking about what we're talking about. You're talking about it. Everybody's, but it's still a subculture.
Yeah.
It is not impacted. It takes a long time to shift a society. And I think my hope is someday, after the resistance breaks down and maybe a couple generations die off, the younger generation's going to pull this into the mainstream and say, let's blow this place up and do it differently.
I'll tell you, I honestly think it's happening faster than that. I get what you're saying, but from where now maybe this is just because I'm sitting kind of in the middle of it by doing this podcast and having amazing people like you on here and Jody Lynn who understand the value of going to the heart rather than the mind and realizing that they're actually connected. They work together and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But I'm seeing a whole lot of people moving in that direction. I mean, like lots and lots and lots of people. We were commenting earlier this week. We had another physician on the show on Monday, and we've had a lot of physicians on the show. Jody Lynn, I think you and I have actually interviewed a couple of them together. A whole bunch of them this year for the first time ever. And every single one of these physicians is breaking out of the matrix, that way, the predefined way of how you do medicine, and they're going off and doing their own variations on things. And every one of them, without fail, everyone is saying, oh yeah, there are so many physicians who are doing the same kind of thing. And that's just physicians. I see the same thing happening all over the place.
Yeah. Further to your point, Walt, I was at the doctor's this morning and she asked me, what do I do? And I said, I have a brokerage business and I also have a coaching business. And she's like, tell me more. And I was like, what do you coach on? I coach people in terms of abundance consciousness, so their relationship with money. And she's like, that's so valuable. I'm glad that you're teaching that, because the mindset around money, I've started to notice this, that, people have a bad relationship. And she started telling me all these stories about her and her husband and all of these things. And I'm like, yeah, that's why I started teaching it. Yeah. But a doctor who I've met like twice, started talking about the mindset and the relationship and relationship with self. Like we had this deep, philosophical conversation while I was in the doctor's office this morning.
That is so cool.
It's really fantastic. What you're saying. And, they can only hope that, this stuff seeps deeper into the educational system and the culture, because it is what matters the most.
Yeah, it really is.
Yeah. I think, Walt, your idea of, sorry to interrupt you, this was a long time ago, and it might not even have been on a show. It might have been on our conversations after. Walt was a part of a school or something that was radically different than the way that normal schools run. But I bet you that model that you were in would teach some of these fundamental critical things that we're talking about here. So maybe we'll go towards
interesting. The model that she's talking about is called the Sudbury model. And yes, my wife and I were both involved in starting a school that started actually in 2002, a year to the date after 9/11. And the basic precept, the concept behind the school is that the students are basically given total freedom on every aspect of their day. They don't have required classes. The teachers aren't in charge. The administrators aren't in charge. The students are in charge. And when you have that kind of model, that's the model that terrifies most parents when they first hear about it. But when you actually play it out, what you end up with is an absolute fascination about just how well, not just kids, actually this is true of anybody, but you see it in kids because you're dealing with a school, how well kids are able to just through their own built-in compasses find their way to what they need to learn in their own way that doesn't fit the old norms, doesn't fit the models, but they actually end up doing it better, faster in many cases. Like, for instance, most of them will spend like years avoiding doing anything with math. Like they don't want to have anything to do with math at all. And then one day they need to learn how to do something to sell something, and all of a sudden they want to learn math, and they learn 6 years of math in 10 weeks. It's that kind of a thing.
There's a reason for it.
Exactly, yeah. So the skills you were talking about, Jody Lynn, yeah, they do get those skills, but it's not like they're taught. It's just that they're picked up along the way. Yeah.
They're given the space to receive the lesson that they need in those moments.
Yeah.
I'm a big believer in structure and systems and principles and all these things. And I think when you set things up like that the right way, it can really work for people because we already have all the stuff we need inside us.
Yes.
We just need a way of kind of organizing it and having somebody kind of put those guardrails around so we don't drift off into the weeds all the time, which we're going to do. But it's really exciting that someone is doing that.
It was fun too to set up the school. I have to say, there's we've done shows on that one. We'll have to do another show at some point too. But on this show, we have something we haven't really talked a lot about because you kind of made reference earlier on to the workshop that you offer, but we really didn't dive into that at all. Give us like a feel. What's that workshop about?
So what we do, I've been running this for about 2 years. So it's every Thursday at 10 o'clock Central Time, US, Chicago. We've had over 1,000 people come through this. I've had hundreds of guest speakers. and I've moved it more in the last few months to a workshop. And the idea is to break down self-employment for solopreneurs into components and take a couple of them or one every week and just really delve into it and understand it. So why is it important? What is it? And we can talk a little bit about how it works. So I don't charge for this. It's an hour. And the way you get to it is you go to GoSoloInc.com, and there's a link to register, and it's every week. So you can just come whenever you want. And it's just an open forum Zoom room, kind of like what I love Zoom room. I've been doing the Zoom room hosting thing for about 2 years, and it's completely changed my life. It's an amazing way to build a community of people.
Mm-hmm.
That's fabulous. Yeah. So I'll make sure that we include the link to GoSoloInc.com in the show notes so that people can get there very, very easily. This has been really an interesting conversation with you, Larry. Very, very interesting.
Thank you.
Yeah. I like a number of things about you, and I'm sure Jody Lynn will have her take on it too. But I love how you have this thing that you wanted to do, and you have the business background, but you're just so low key and relaxed about it. You basically are demonstrating inner peace without actually teaching inner peace. And I love that. That's fabulous.
Yeah. And just the courage that it took to allow yourself to choose a different path that's completely unconventional. I'm sure people that are, around your age in the same kind of category, whatever, would have been like, no, save all of your money and then you can retire.
People told me not to do this.
Yeah, exactly.
They actively said that's a really stupid thing to do.
Yeah, but to have the courage and follow that intuition, follow your heart and where you were really being led, that takes courage. And you're a great example for everybody that's listening today and everybody that you're working with as well, just the world in general. So thank you for that, Larry.
Thank you so much. And I appreciate the opportunity, and I enjoyed the conversation as well.
And I also need to add in that there are many people who you've never met, you've never seen, who have maybe seen you on a podcast or read something that you wrote, or maybe they kind of lurked in the background in one of the workshops and they took something away from it. They got an advantage. They got some sort of benefit, and you never heard about it. But you also never got any feedback on it. So on their behalf, I want to thank you for what you do for them, for those unseen people that you never see, you never meet, probably never will see, never will meet, but you've touched their lives and continue to touch their lives going forward.
Yes.
So thank you very much. Thank you to our podcast listeners everywhere. We'll see you all next time here on LOA Today. Goodbye, everybody.